feel like you're a pot stirrer. I feel like they pushed you until you had to say, here's my stake in the ground.
ESPN, and I was there for 16 and a half years, and that was my childhood dream. I'm sad that I had to make the decision to stand up for myself at my place of work. There was tolerance and acceptance if you had certain viewpoints, but not if you had other viewpoints. They punished me and suspended me and took me off the air and took assignments away. When I'm being punished just for being true to myself while complying with your rules, that was the line.
Sage is giving every single woman permission to be courageous. Hi, I'm Lisa Bevere, and I am joined by my daughter-in-law, Christian Bevere, and today we have a special guest. Christian, we are welcoming Sage Steele, and I can't even tell you how excited I'm about this interview and sharing it with y'all.
I absolutely loved having her on, and I can tell you did as well, because she brought such conviction, but light as well.
Yeah, and I think Sage is giving every single woman permission to be courageous. And I love how she is going to unpack this for you, but I want to highlight something for you to listen to. Sometimes you find out that you have stepped into that battlefield, that realm where you have to learn that courage means I do not cave anymore, unexpectedly. And when that happens, I hope you hear Sage's word, you hear this conversation, you know the word of God. And one of the scriptures I kept thinking while we were listening to her, I feel like Sage in many ways is an Esther, that she came into a position of influence for such a time as this. And each and every one of us have influence, and we were made for such a time as this. And if we choose to remain silent, God will still have his way. Relief, deliverance is going to come from another source, but you will not create a pathway for you and your family. So let's dive in. Sage, welcome to the Fight for Female podcast. Did you ever think that your name, Steele, was going to be in your future, that you were going to have to be a woman of conviction and strength?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. The answer is an emphatic no, because I never knew. Oh gosh, I just had this crazy dream to talk about sports and tell people's stories and bring smiles, because I think sports brings us together. I really do. And like your race, your politics, your religion, your socioeconomic status, nothing matters with sports on a football Sunday. And so I just wanted to do that. And I never thought it would turn into, first of all, an incredible career and achieving that childhood dream. So grateful. The world has changed, and now here we are. And now everybody thinks I've just got this big mouth and I'm a pot stirrer. I'm like, no, I'm not. But here we are.
Now, I don't feel like you're a pot stirrer. I feel like they pushed you until you had to say, here's my stake in the ground. And I don't feel like you came after a issue, but that you found that you could not step back from where you needed to stand. And I want to thank you for that. I think you came across my radar. I listened to you speak with Megyn Kelly, and you were so well-spoken. And I started to just dive deep, because I have a heart to see women find their voice. And what I've learned, and I want you to tell your story, is what I've learned is people follow courage. And what we've all had happen during the pandemic was there was an epidemic of cowardice, and people lost their voice. They shut down, they canceled themselves. And all of a sudden, when somebody finds their voice, it gives other people permission to do the same. So I want you to kind of tell a little bit of your story to our audience of women who believe that female is worth fighting for.
Well, first of all, when you discovered me and I discovered you, I was like, oh my goodness, this woman and what you are doing and the following that you've created through having healthy, productive, important conversations. So thank you. Don't get me choked up. And the fact that you're there with your daughter, like what you are doing is just beautiful.
Thank you.
I hope that my daughter likes me this much. Someday I have 2 daughters, and my son's the easy one in the middle, and I'm like, "I hope these girls come around and I can do something like you're doing
Okay,
someday."
but this is even more amazing. This is not my daughter. This is my daughter-in-law.
In-law.
I
That's
have
what you told me,
4
your
sons. No,
daughter-in-law.
that's okay. This is
You're not the
Christian.
first person to.
Yeah, she may look more like me than my son does. It is kind of
No,
funny.
it's absolutely incredible that how much you look alike, and actually, that's even more special
Yeah.
because quite often daughters-in-law with that mother, like, that doesn't always work. So you need to give yourself some credit because I know, listen,
you.
the young woman that my daughter marries, that my son marries someday, like, she better be amazing or I will cut her. I will take her out. Like,
I have a son, so I feel that. I don't know how she let 4 of us in, but she is amazing.
oh my gosh. Well, anyway, I just love what you're doing and it's so necessary. And the word courage, I've been uncomfortable with for a long time because it's just never how I would have thought to describe myself. And I still feel uncomfortable with it. But I do know that sometimes I have made courageous decisions, but even in the moment, I didn't realize it. It's more looking back and I'm like, oh, wow, that took a little bit of extra. um, I will say this listen, I am sad that I had to make the decision to stand up for myself at my place of work. And for people who don't know, yeah, I know you've already described a little bit at the intro, but ESPN, and I was there for 16 and a half years, and that was my childhood dream. And I had 11 years in different TV markets prior to ESPN. So a 28-year career in broadcasting. And the world just kind of went crazy. And I felt it coming years prior. And then I just have more of a conservative viewpoint on many things, but I always kept that to myself because it does not have anything to do with my job. And I think it's important to separate, especially as a journalist. So I did that for years and years and years. And then on private platforms, I would say some things that I felt, and it wasn't as big of a deal. But then, COVID changed things. George Floyd, that incident changed a lot of things and people's sensitivities. And what I found, what I experienced, what changed my life was, there was tolerance and acceptance if you had certain viewpoints, but not if you had other viewpoints.
If you're enjoying this podcast, I want to challenge you about partnering with us. We are so excited about a partnership program. We're going to be bringing you exclusive content. So you want to get in on the ground floor, go ahead and click the link below.
And that's where I had to make a decision. And basically I went on a podcast like this one on a day off, non-ESPN related. And his name is Jay Cutler. You guys know he lives out there in Tennessee, former NFL quarterback. And he had me on. It was a new podcast. He wanted to have a woman on and, sports industry. And he just did a great job asking a lot of personal questions that I was happy to answer about being a biracial girl growing up and obviously still as a woman, and how I choose to celebrate my entire family, my white mom and my black dad, not just my black side, which apparently is controversial to some. And then also the COVID mandate. I had actually just come from getting vaccinated, and it was a forced vaccination in order to keep my job. And I was devastated about having to do that. This is in the September of 2021, a very different time. And in order to keep my job, I had to do it. And I was emotional and I was upset, but I went on and he asked me about it because I happened to still have a band-aid on my shoulder. I had literally just come from the pharmacy and had been sobbing. But I had to do that. And I just said, listen, I think it's sick and scary for anyone to force anybody to do something to their body. I said, but I work for a global company, Disney, and they mandate it to keep my job. And I love my job. I love my job and I need my job. So here we are. And those words changed my life, even though I complied with the rule, the mandate. So that's the gist of it. And so like, they punished me and suspended me and took me off the air and took assignments away. And that was the line where when I'm being punished just for being true to myself while complying with your rules, then I realized my entire career I'd worked all these years and sacrificed so much, and they'd given me so much too. And then just because I don't, like, if I had said, all you anti-vaxxers, go to hell and you're what, I would have been celebrated. And so I didn't appreciate the hypocrisy, and I stood up for myself, and I unfortunately filed a lawsuit, free speech, because there are laws in the state of Connecticut. You can speak openly about your employer if you're following rules, and I was, and so to be punished, actually, broke a law. So we settled with Disney, August of 23. Again, still devastated to have had to make the decision, but I'll shut up after this. What I'm so grateful for is, like, this was so much bigger than me. I stood up because at that moment, yes, I had to, but I'd already been punished. I felt the vibe, I think, in hindsight, like, once you choose to stand up, you're probably not gonna be around for long, you know? So that was a difficult thing to accept. But I knew there'd been so many people, thousands of people writing me, DMing me, coming up to me at airports or restaurants, whispering, "Thank you. I feel scared to speak too. I feel silenced as well." And it would make me cry because I thought I was alone. And the whole time I was not alone. The whole time there were people who felt the same way, who just didn't want to be forced to do something, an experimental vaccine, as we now know. And so I realized this is bigger than me. And if I don't speak up, shame on me to have this platform and live in fear because of being canceled and losing money. And trust me, I have. All those things have happened, but I'm so grateful now, to have been able to do it, and that God gave me the strength to pull that trigger and stand up, even though it's been really costly.
Well, again, I just want to say thank you. And I love that you're actually outlining that there was a cost. There is a cost. The cost might have been canceled from people that were afraid to align with you, or financial cost, but there would have been a greater cost. You would have felt divided in your soul. You would have felt like you were untrue to the truth. And this, I think, has become the big challenge for me. And, when I'm not a sportscaster. I am seen as a Christian author or a minister. And I watched so many people afraid to just say things that they knew were truth. And I just feel like every time somebody like you finds their voice, it gives permission for women all over the world, and men. And if we do not find our voice, what are we leaving for our daughters? Sage, one of my favorite quotes of all times is a quote, which I'm sure everybody is tired of me hearing it, of me saying it, but it's a quote by Matthew Arnold. And he said, "If ever there comes a time when the women of the world come together purely and simply for the benefit of mankind, they will be a force such as the world has never known." And I believe his words in the 1800s were a call to arms, not for violence, but a call to arms for women all over the world to remember that we come together for the good of all. And we don't just come together for the good of women or the good of white women or the good of black women, but the good of all. And you are the merging of a story. You are the merging, just even with your biology, the merging of the beauty and the strength that is found when someone finds their voice for all. And I just want to thank you for that. And Christian's, oh, absolutely. And Christian's got some amazing questions, that some of them that you've already answered, but Christian is beautiful and brave. And she has a beautiful little boy, and she's carrying a little girl right now. I know. So excited. She'd never come into the boy world. And so boy was a brand new world, but she comes from a long line of beautiful, strong women. But when Christian did her gender reveal off our front porch, Christian did this amazing, tell her your story and tell her the reaction you got. Can you tell her that?
Yeah. I had a feeling it was a boy. So I told my husband, I was like, we're going to do a bow and arrow reveal, because when my son watches this, I want him to be like, that's my cool mom out there with a bow and arrow. And the balloon exploded and it was blue, and we posted it and people were like, this is a genital reveal, not a gender reveal. I Oh, and
What?
it's kind of like what you were saying. It's one of those common sense things, but for some reason, I was like, Is it? This is a gender reveal, right?"
This is DNA. This is
Yes.
not, we didn't see a penis. We
No.
just saw blue smoke.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And that was what year? Was that
That was
2022?
2021 or two. It was
Yes.
right around the
Yeah.
fall to spring. So
And right then, I watched people jump on this whole idea that you were not allowed to speak truth, that you needed to have nuance, that you needed to echo the narrative. You know, whatever they wanted you to say was all that you could say. And then in the sports world, I remember seeing this magnificently produced video by a watch company where they talked about, hey, this is our response. And it did this beautiful story of this father coaching his daughter to run and run well. And he said, there's ain't no woman alive who can beat you. And then all of a sudden she is on the starting line and there is a young man. And I just reposted that, Sage. And I watched people tell me, this is transphobic. This is hate. You are a minister. You can't say these kind of things. And I'm like, wait a minute. I will fight to protect our daughters. I will fight to protect the divine identity of women. And I will fight to protect the sanctity of life. And there's just like this certain line that I'm like, I'm not going to cross it. And, again, I saw that, and then I saw you speak up about sports as well. And I know that you've gotten pushback, no doubt, not because I've heard it or seen it, but I've just experienced it myself.
Yes. Well, first of all, it's pathetic that people reacted to either one of your stories in that way. And by the way, who are they to tell you how to handle a reveal or what you should take from it or what you're doing? Like, stay in your lane. Like, these people must be so gored. I just don't understand. I just want. Oh. Secondly, like, that commercial is so powerful. And oh, by the way, it's the truth. It's the truth. And so you're just reposting the facts of what is actually happening out there. When I first spoke up about it, it was a year and a half ago when Riley Gaines really started to get vocal about things, and she's become a great friend. The fact that she's I'm more than twice her age is scary because she's so eloquent and brilliant and smart. And you talk about courageous, right? But I was still at ESPN at the time, and I'm reading this stuff, and I was saying to my producers long before Riley started speaking up, "Do you see what's happening in swimming? What are we doing?" And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, quite. We're not doing that. We'll leave it for." And it just kept getting louder and louder. So when I spoke up about it and just retweeted some of her stuff, pro woman, I was told, not only by my employer to stay quiet, even though but we at the time are so adamant about supporting women in women's sports. And they've done a great job in many, many facets of that. But on social media, I was by Megan Rapinoe, right? The soccer legend who came out and put me in a sentence with Dave Chappelle, the comedian, who's hysterical on many topics. He does his thing his way, and he is hysterical because he doesn't care. He says the truth, right? He's fearless. And I so appreciate that, especially with this topic. So she put me in a sentence with Dave Chappelle and Martina Navratilova, obviously a gay legendary athlete who is against all this trans sports stuff. And so she said, Megan Rapinoe said that the three of us are inciting violence on trans people by taking this stance on supporting women in sports. And that's what you experienced, right? You're transphobic. And I'm like, no, you can support women and fight for all of the growth that has taken place over the last 52 years since Title IX with women. Support people like Christian, my daughter, everybody, right? And still realize, yes, trans people deserve a place in our society and in sports, everything, not at the cost of women. It's very simple. This is biology. This is science. This is nothing new. So what are we doing? And if we choose to stay silent on this topic, this is my viewpoint, then we will all have, and I hate to be, but you'll have blood on your hands because look what's happening. And I'm in the state of Connecticut currently, where in the town next to us, my daughter actually competed with this young woman, Chelsea Mitchell, one of the first young women to stand up and file a lawsuit against the state of Connecticut. It's now in the Supreme Court because she was the top sprinter in the state of Connecticut. And then all of a sudden, what happened? A young boy, two young boys decided, I'm going to be a girl and then I'm going to beat her out. And they took her state championships and she stood up and she's like 23 years old now. And I'm like, if these young women are standing up and are so alone with no money, this costs a lot of money, then who am I as someone who has championed women for all these years to remain silent out of fear? That's what these people enjoy creating, is fear, to make sure we stay silent. I've tried to ask myself, and I'm sure you have too, why? Like, what is the goal behind all this? Behind the divisiveness, behind the ugliness, behind the name calling, behind spewing lies. Like this is man, woman. This is as simple as it gets, guys. This isn't even about a COVID vaccine and the like should be no. This is science with biology. Men and women are very different in many ways, and we're going to celebrate both of them. Why? And the only thing I can think of, and I'd love your thoughts. The only thing I can think of, the only thing that makes sense, like, this is evil. People don't want to use that word because it's scary and uncomfortable, but there's no other way to describe what this is. And in an effort to silence, but more importantly, to put women and girls in the situation, what Riley and thousands of young women have had to endure. They're the ones that were told to go to sensitivity training to make sure that when Leah Thomas and all those other men calling themselves women came in their locker rooms, that they knew how to speak to them and use the right pronouns. And if you're uncomfortable changing near him, they called him her, then you can go over in the restroom or in the closet. So again, there comes a line. What I told Megan Kelly that very first day, which was 2 days after I left ESPN, and I was certainly emotional and raw and was so appreciative of her platform. And we've become friends over the last couple years with what she has gone through prior. Um, I did not know what my line was until it was crossed. I didn't know. But when it's crossed and all of a sudden you feel something in your gut, um, it's hard to ignore. Then again, many people, you mentioned that quote that you shared, which I love. I've shared this many times and my kids and everybody get tired of it, but I'm going to say it and I hope that you take something from it. It's from the cadet prayer at West Point. My dad is a West Point graduate, and my parents are my absolute best friends. And as kids, my dad made us, I'm the oldest of three, I have two brothers, made us memorize this portion of the cadet prayer. Help me to choose the hard or right instead of the easy or wrong, and to never be content with a half truth when the whole truth can be won. So when you break that down, the harder right versus the easier wrong, we all know what that is. I use the grocery cart analogy. Like, okay, weather here is bad a lot in Connecticut and it's snowing and I had three little kids and I got groceries and I have somewhere to get to. And that cart, am I going to shove it up on the curb because I'm in a rush and my kids are crying and my life is more important? Or am I going to take 30 seconds and put it in the slot that they have designated for carts, or maybe even bring it back up to the front of the Target or the grocery store? Like, the right thing is to put the cart back. This is not rocket science here, but it takes a little more effort. In this case, with us standing up for ourselves and for others, we know it's the right thing. It's scary. And like I said, it's costly, but it is, that prayer has helped me in so many ways to make tough decisions. And when I decided to stand up with my lawsuit, I have three kids at the time. One was a freshman in college, one was a senior in high school, and one was a sophomore in high school. And I went to each kid separately the night before the lawsuit dropped. And I said, listen, this is coming, and I just don't want you to be surprised. And I don't want you to ever feel like you have to defend me, ever, ever. I said, if someone asks you something, which teachers have, coaches have, other parents, social media, my kids have been attacked because of their mother's opinions and stances on things. But I said, if someone at school or an adult, usually even kids, says something, just say, diversity of thought. My mom believes in diversity of thought. And even if we disagree, she has that right. But I said, don't ever feel like you have to defend me, but I want you to know this is coming. the girls, different reactions. My son, who was 17 at the time, looked at me and he said, "Mom, it's about time you stood up for yourself." And it about broke me because I thought that by staying silent for all these years, I was doing the right thing to protect them. And what that moment taught me was that they'd been watching the whole time when I made myself smaller. I cry every time. I made myself smaller and I got quiet because I didn't want to upset them. And I didn't want to upset my bosses. I didn't want to upset my peers. I didn't want to upset my friends. I didn't want to upset social media. I didn't want to not be liked. And in the meantime, my son in particular had been watching. And so it's a lesson, especially young mothers and fathers and mentors. Like, it's easier to be quiet, but there is a cost. And now I believe that by standing up, like my kids won't wait till they're 50 to be true to themselves. That's what I pray, that they won't wait as long, or else this world, excuse my language, but this world is screwed if everybody just stays quiet. You know what I mean? So now I'm crying. It's great.
No, no.
Well, I want to thank you both for the ways that you stand up for your families, for women everywhere. I mean, as that young mother in my 20s, I can say that for one more year, so I'm going to keep saying it. Sorry, everyone watching. But I just want to thank you guys because I'm a journalism major with books. I love what you've stewarded, and you've shown women they have a voice. Sage, I grew up with an Alabama football coach dad. I don't have to explain to you what that means. It means I have all girls, but you will love sports. So I went the route of thinking ESPN is the dream. And I remember I did an intern day. So excited, right? I'm sure you remember like the first experience of really getting to talk about sports and show your love. And I spent the whole day like trying my best, loving being on the field, only to end the day with the director looking at me and saying, "Hey, if we're going to talk about your future, I just want you to know you could be a 10 in Alabama, but be like a 5 in New York." And I was just like, I spent this whole day working my butt off, talking about the love of the game, only for you to see me for my looks. But in that moment, I get it. I was silent. I was speechless. I didn't know how to even.
I just now heard this. Now I want to punch somebody. Yes, okay.
But I was speechless because I was like, well, why is that the lens you see me through? Am I going to, kind of what you're saying, am I going to put up with that? Am I going to roll over and just be like, oh, well, thanks for thinking I'm a 5. Can you still hire, And so I want to ask you, going on that point of if we remain silent, or when we come to that line, what is your advice now that you've been through what you've been through to young women who could be in a career challenge like you faced, or a social media frenzy as you see sometimes, if not weekly? What's your advice for knowing where your line is and how to stand up? Is it having community? Is it having conversations with your partner? What would you advise young women to do?
All of the above. And I will say this, and it's maybe something we can talk about later or at another time. I also, like when the pandemic began, I had just gone through a divorce as well. And I married my college sweetheart, and the only boyfriend I'd ever had. And I've been together for 20 years married and 27 total my whole life. So I didn't have that partner. And that was very difficult, but I had my parents and a very small, close-knit group of friends, and I had my faith. And my faith had never been stronger. And listen, it's a journey, right? And right now I'm in a lull and I'm trying to get back up. And but if you I don't know how people make that decision and choose whether or not to stand up without that faith. I don't know. So I think everything, number one, starts there. And just I would get that feeling when it's like, okay, do I say something in that moment, like one that you described, something, potentially similar? And it's like, okay, my first reaction I've noticed in recent years, when I was younger, I would just go like this, but it's like to be like, I don't know, like snap, like, excuse me, and then get the crazy. And it's like, okay, deep breath. And my aunt taught me this. So I'll real quick say to myself, Jesus, I trust in you. Jesus, I trust in you. And it calms me. And I truly do believe it. Number one. Number two, um, the most important thing besides your faith, I believe, and that's a personal decision, but is to be okay knowing that not everybody's going to like you. be okay. Like you got to let go of that pleaser disease. And I have had it my whole life. So once you realize that no matter how kind you are, how well you treat people, how good you are at your job, like all the things, people are still not going to like you. And maybe as usually my mom taught me this, it has nothing to do with you. Usually it's a lot to do with them and their own personal situation. Maybe they're going through something that's devastating, a health issue with a parent or a loved one, and they're snapping out and saying nasty things to you because of what they're going through. I say this to my kids all the time. It's not an excuse for bad behavior on social media, whatever it may be, but it might be a reason. So once we can get through to understand that when people treat you like that, there must be something kind of going on in their life at minimum, if not something dark in their heart and their soul at that moment. And that has helped me forgive. That has helped me not respond on social media. I literally almost never respond, and that is not who I used to be. There's power in that because what they do want is for you. They want to engage. That's why they keep calling you out and keep coming at you and writing these nasty messages and sending out like, so there's a real peace, Christian, and just realizing that, are you being true to yourself? Yes. Are you being kind in the way you do it? Yeah. You know, um, then it all and tends to be easier. Do you have to have tough conversations? Absolutely. For me, I'll write down a couple bullet points that I want to mention. Quite often it's like this or on a phone call, and you can glance down at the couple points you want to make. I say this to my kids. Tone is everything. Your words are usually fine, but the way you say it is everything. And my kids are 22, 20, and 18. And I'm like, have you not gotten this through your thick skulls yet? That the way you talk to me is going to dictate my reaction. Like, why is this so difficult, people? So again, faith, um, and again, knowing it's not always about you, but what is your line? You're not going to be able to say, here's if someone does this, 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 and this, I'm done. Maybe, but then they're going to do something else that you haven't thought of. And then you're going to be like, oh gosh, what do I do? So, but don't be afraid to rely on others for help. And I think I also had too much pride. I didn't want to inconvenience my friends or parents or anybody with my little issues. And so I would just keep it to myself. But those that love you want to hear. They want to be a sounding board, if nothing else, for you, especially um, mothers and fathers and mothers-in-law, like they want to be there for you. And I think I just was too concerned about being a burden, and I would just keep it in. So just do everything everything the opposite of what I did, and you'll be fine.
I don't know that she needs to do all of that. I want to circle back as we close to something you said that I feel like is really important to highlight. You said, I've asked why, and I've come to the realization that we are wrestling with evil. And I want to highlight something for everybody that's listening to this conversation. We are not wrestling with flesh and blood, but we are wrestling. There is dark forces behind what is going on in our country, dark forces behind the unmaking of male and female, dark forces behind the unmaking of what it means to be a family, to be a woman, to be a man. All of these things, Ephesians makes it really clear that we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but with principalities and powers and rulers of wickedness in high places that exalt themselves against us, knowing God. And it isn't about religion. It is about a knowing. It is about that knowing God. And I find that we find God not in places where we have certainty, but where we find ourselves questioning and doubting. And when, like you said, I didn't know that I had had a courageous moment. I thought I was just having a off interview. But then there came this time where you realized that something had been crossed. And a lot of people, they come to that place, Sage, and they backpedal. And they say, oh, well, I didn't really mean that. Or I didn't really, okay, I'm sorry. I'll have him pull that down. But I love that you talk to your children, because what I have learned is what I do not face off, the fears, the courage, the struggle, the patterns. What I do not face off in my life, my children inherit. And I've learned, and again, I'm the grandmother soon to be 9, that our children either inherit God's promises or our fears. And I do not want this next generation to inherit fear of man pleasing, constantly shifting and changing. Because you and I both know you could dance this way, and they're like, no, we don't like that dance anymore. We want you to do that dance. Oh, no, that dance now needs to be topless. It is never going to be enough because it is an enemy that is pulling people like puppets. And I think as long as we can stop seeing this division, of like, oh, it's us against them, but understand that there is something much darker in the shadows, pulling the strings, trying to divide our nation with a revelation that divided houses, divided countries, divided family, divided organizations collapse. So I just want to thank you for your unifying voice of courage.
Can I say this, because I'm so glad that we're on the same page with that, because people don't like that word evil, and it's very uncomfortable to look around and think what is lurking. But I think right now we're in denial if we don't at least acknowledge that.
Yeah.
While acknowledging it, and I know you believe this too, there's so much good.
Yes.
I think most people are inherently good. I see it every day. Even I live in Connecticut, not for long. I'm getting ready to move fully to Florida once I'm an empty nester now as of August, and I'm like, goodbye Northeast and high taxes and cold weather. I'm out. This is one part of the country where there are some wonderful people, but like, it's tougher where you are. It's, oh gosh, but for the most part, you see on airplanes and everywhere, people are good. People are kind, even if you're different. People want to help, and that's why there's, like, again, what you're doing, and so many are starting to do, is to highlight the good. That's what inspires me to keep going. Is that there are many people who let's tell their stories. Let's uplift them. And while doing it, and my new I've been saying this for 15 years. It's just now I'm able to say it a little bit louder. Diversity of thought is everything. We talk so much about diversity, DEI, and skin color and gender and all that. No, if you are diverse with your thinking, and that means you're accepting and tolerant of others no matter what. Doesn't mean I have to agree or go along with what you say, but I'm going to respect your different opinion, especially if you're having a conversation in a healthy way. When you're doing this, that is the antithesis of what most of these people preach, right? That diversity of thought. So I just think listen, and you have created this platform. You have done this, which has taken so much courage. So what are we going to do with the platform? And that is to continue to ignore that hate that's always going to come. But again, I think it comes because most of them are uncomfortable with something they have or have not done, something they're going through or are experiencing. And again, not an excuse, but maybe a reason. And there is really comfort in knowing that you're finally being true to yourself. And when you are, every time I've spoken publicly about my experience at ESPN, it's not like, woe is me. And, the whole Disney thing. My
or
goodness,
bashing.
It's not woe is me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not. But it's just for those people watching, I have realized they thought they were alone, just like I did. Yeah. So what a shame if I keep this in, you know what I mean? Even with the devastating end of my marriage, like, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Christian. You don't do that. You don't end it, right? Yeah. I've had to forgive myself and work through that. Forgive myself for, feeling like we quit, and we didn't, man. But like, life takes over, and you don't know people's reasons. You assume, Yeah. So, but when I have shared that pain, and I haven't done it much because I have 3 kids, I'm very sensitive to that. But women and men also realize they're not alone going through something so painful while trying to exist in the world and go to work. I'm on national TV every day dealing with that before all the drama began,
Yes,
and being a mother to 3 wonderful humans. So I'll shut up. I'm sorry I get going. You guys made me super comfortable. But like, when we share that vulnerability, and when you are okay sharing your pain, not to garner sympathy, but to help others know that they're not alone, that's when the healing begins. That's when we all can continue to progress in this crazy world, and to also recognize there's so much good that people are experiencing and want to give to us. Sometimes we just don't give them an opportunity, and it's amazing how far a smile will go. It
Yeah.
really is. So I'm grateful to know that I'm not alone out there fighting too.
You're
For
not.
women and for men, like for all of us. It's not just women, right? But for today it is.
Yeah. Well, we believe that when you elevate and free women, you free men. We believe that you don't free one at the expense of the other. So we believe that. Sage, I love you. I love what you do. We're gonna put in the notes, but I hope everybody watches your show because I believe you are tackling tough topics with people, unexpected, but in a conversation way. I feel like you're dismantling the stigmas and people depersonalize people into rivals, and you are taking away that depersonalization and causing people to listen in to people that maybe they wouldn't ever listen to. You're actually doing the diversity of thought on your show, and I knew I would love you, but I didn't know I would love you this much. So this is
Thank you.
exciting.
Thank you so much. And I'll just thank you for pumping my show out there. It's only a couple months
Absolutely.
old, but the one thing I'll say I'm disappointed about is I've reached out to a lot of people who I know have different opinions politically and culturally,
Yeah.
whatever, and most of them say no and won't come on. So as I try to have these diverse conversations with so many people who preach that, and some of them I know, and
Wow.
they through the representative won't come on. So that's quite telling. So you can't preach it, but then not practice it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Have the conversation. And I don't even want to talk about politics necessarily. I want to talk about what's in your heart. Like
Yeah.
we all have opinions based on our experiences.
Mhm.
And so let's just respect that. But when people say no, I'm like, okay, well then don't complain. You know what I mean? So it's just been fun to have a conversation, to forget the cameras are there and go
Yeah.
deep with some of these people who are from RFK Jr. to Dana White to Sharon Osbourne to Jillian Michaels. Like I've had so much fun
Yeah.
learning. Like
Yeah.
we have these impressions of people who are on TV,
Yeah.
and it's like, yeah, that's great, but they're humans with problems and pain and
Yes.
fear and pride. So I'm grateful that they've given me they've trust. I haven't met one of them before except Matt Barnes, the NBA player. All the other people that have been on my show, I'd never once met in person, and I'm grateful that they've trusted me to open up a little bit because again, when we open up, we help others. So thank you for wanting to have me on, Lisa. And
Absolutely.
I'm really honored, and you've inspired me and so many women. So you didn't have to do this either, what you're doing.
No, you were top of the list. Christian knows I was like, I really want Sage Steele to be heard by our audience because, you have something to say, but you're saying it in such a beautiful, healing, strong way. And so thank you so much. And I'm going to send a whole package to you. And so don't move too quick because I need an address. So
Thank you.
thank you for being on. You're amazing.
Well, Lisa, I know there's women from all different backgrounds, different countries, seasons of life, different thoughts, even listening to this podcast. And I think Sage did such a great job of introducing a way to wrestle with the things of this world, but not in the ways of this world, don't you?
Yeah. And I also love that she invited us into conversations with people we don't agree with. Like we can have conversations with people and we don't have to push that we're right and they're wrong, but that when we hear one another, there's a chance for understanding instead of depersonalization. And I love diversity of thought. Diversity of thought means I am open to be taught, and I am open to listening, and I am open to being heard. We need to be vulnerable with one another. We need to share our thoughts. And I hope that you are subscribing. Christian, I went on, I was reading all the comments. I'm like, why are these people not subscribing? Like,
She's going to call you
Don't come
out.
in by accident. Don't come in by accident. We want you to be part of the Fight for Female Families. So how do they do that?
Yeah. Well, they start by sharing their thoughts, leaving comments, subscribing, because we want this to be a community of women, again, from all over, from different backgrounds.
And we allow men to slip in.
Yes, we can, as long as you're nice. Just kidding. But make sure that you're subscribed so that you don't miss a single episode. And we have these guests like Sage coming regularly. So subscribe, like, comment, and even share with a friend.